through ethics in research as part of the research innovation skills module. Once again, I'm Prof. Gutsire from the faculty immunology unit. Right, that's my presentation outline. You know, I would actually need 3 days to take you through everything that you might need to know about research ethics, but you only have an hour. So here I am. I just made a mini version of all my presentations so that I can give you a basic overview, so that if you've never heard about the word ethics, at least you'll get an idea, you'll understand what this means. So what I'll be covering during this 1 hour is going through the definition of research, definition of research ethics, then a little bit about evolution of research ethics, what we mean, and where this whole concept of research ethics came from. Then I'll touch on research ethics guidelines. Then I'll take you through what we call the Zimbabwe Research Regulatory Framework. When we say regulatory, we mean there are actually bodies, organizations that are responsible for giving oversight or for monitoring to see how research that is being done by students, research being done by lecturers, research being done by anyone in Zimbabwe which involves human beings. So they do monitor, they give approvals, they check. People are not harming each other. Because in the past, people actually died when they participated in research. The main objective was actually to kill people. But now we have those regulatory bodies. I'll speak to it. We also have key players in research. Who are the key players? The people that take part in research or that carry out research. Then I'll touch on famous and ethical research. There are some case studies or things that have happened, atrocities that have happened in the past that you guys need to be aware of. Then I'll take that opportunity to refer you to the internet. You know, I love the internet. I love Google. It's a whole university. You can actually learn. So the things that I'm going to touch on here, you can go and expound on them, learn more, read more on the internet. If you just type on Sister Google there, then you can read more about those famous and ethical research studies that have happened in the past. Vulnerable populations. What do we mean when we say vulnerable? I mean pregnant women, kids, babies who are not mature enough to, or in the case of pregnant women, because they'll have a fetus that has to be protected, and people below the age of 18 that need protection. Fundamental research ethics principles, I'll cover that with you. Then informed consent in health research. When we're carrying out research, we need to ask the people for permission that we can measure their. Prof. Chifamba yesterday talked about measuring blood pressure in adults out there in Marondera. You need to ask the person, can I take a, do you agree to take part in my research? Usually they should sign, because in Zimbabwe, we say our literacy rate is very high. So people can read and write. They should give written consent. If that is not possible, there should be a witness to agree that if in the case of old people, if my father is 87, if you want to do research on him, one of us, his kids, has to be there to give consent. At least you'll understand what you want to do, and then we agree on his behalf. So that's the issues to do with informed consent in health. You don't force people to participate in your research. You don't force people to give blood. Lots of research was done during the COVID era, where people were giving their blood, and then swabs in the nose were taken for research. But you need get informed consent and you explain clearly to the people. So let me see how I can write. The definition of research ethics is the application of the set of moral. What do you mean when we say moral? Moral hinges on the aspect of something being wrong or something being right. So without even writing these things down, you can actually know intuitively that doing this is wrong, doing this, but we've put these things in writing so that we can all share. So moral principles or a system of moral principles or rules of behavior that is acceptable to the system. So we're going to talk about the right way to do research and acceptable by the national laws and international guidelines. Right? Just to recap on the definition of research, we said we're going to be writing and trying to carry out innovative research. So what is research? It is a systematic investigation, including research development, that's writing the proposal, what we covered yesterday with Mr. Kauri. Then we need to submit that for ethics review. That's why I'm talking to you today. Then we move on, implement our study, testing, and evaluation that is designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. So you guys are going to develop a proposal or something innovative in your area, and we'll take you through steps. So application for ethics clearance is one of the things that you'll have to do when you do your proposals. Let me touch on key players. This is a whole module that can actually take an hour, but I just have one slide to show you who are the key players and their responsibilities in the conduct, so that you know from the outset what kind of people I'm talking about. And you guys, you are included. We have what we call research participants, people who agree to take part in a research. Let's say it's collection of blood in a community to test the prevalence of HIV in that particular area. Those are the research. In the past, they used to be called research subject. But when you say subject, it means people that we speak down to, we just do what we want. But now we call them participants, because without them, some of the research can't be done. Then we have what you call principal investigators. That's the person who leads the team that will be writing the proposal. Then that is done. Then students in an academic, like in your case, the 800 of you who are supposed to be taking part in this research innovation skills module, when developing proposals, then you'll be players in research. Then sponsors, those are the people who give us the money. Ethics committees, I'm going to be talking about JREC. Some of you might be hearing this for the first time since you're in part 2. I'm sure you've never submitted in a proposal. We do have our committee within the Faculty of Medicine called JREC. So all students, all staff need to take their proposals. You develop your proposal, as students, you give it to your supervisor, you meet the supervisor, they approve, then you can take it to JREC. That is the Joint Research Ethics Committee for Paririnyatwa and for the Faculty of Health Sciences for clearance. So this committee actually sits to see what you're proposing. You're not going to be harming people. I'll take a simple example. A protocol that is proposing to determine malaria prevalence, let's say in water area there. So they'll need to check in your proposal if you haven't proposed anything that is dangerous to the people. Imagine if somebody writes that they want to be taking 5 liters of blood from the people for malaria. So the committee, their role is to check on all that you are proposing to be doing. 5 liters is just too much. You'll be killing people. So they will guide you accordingly. Because most of these committees have scientists, people who have expertise in their different fields. So it is to look at the proposals, to review, to give comments, and to check that when the proposal and is implemented, no one will be harmed. So it's to protect both you as a researcher, that you don't go out there and carry out unethical research, and also to protect participants. Regulatory authorities, we do have the mostly control or monitor how drugs are registered. We do have the medicine. I'll talk about it when I give you the research regulatory framework. Then we have community advisory boards. When researchers go out there in the community, they usually encourage to set up a committee with community representatives, people that are known in the community, such that then they form a link between the researchers and the community participants. Then data safety monitoring committees, boards, these are set up, especially clinical trials, to check. Let's say, I'll give an example of the COVID. We all know COVID hit us very hard. And then there were drugs, there were vaccines that were developed for COVID, but they could not just be straight from the lab and from the manufacturing company straight into people queuing up for it. It had to go through what you call clinical trials, and we'll cover that next week. So when a clinical trial is done, it's to test the different vaccines in a small number of people, can be 10, can be 20 or 50, to see the safety of that vaccine before it is rolled out. So their job, this data safety monitoring committee, is to regularly check the people that are vaccinated with the vaccine. In this case, I'm using COVID, the development of the COVID vaccine. So that's the process it had to go through. And once the committee thinks maybe people are dying because of the vaccine, they'll have to stop the trial. Or if all is okay, then they'll continue. So those vaccines, I'm sure all of you here were vaccinated. Those drugs went through clinical trials and were approved by data safety monitoring committees that they were safe for use human beings. Right. So that's the Zimbabwe research regulatory framework. I don't want to lose you. What I'm just showing you are the different councils, different bodies, or the different offices who give oversight to research that is done in Zimbabwe, or who monitor what is happening as far as carrying out research. So I want you guys to know that you can think up an idea to do research, but you don't just wake up from your blankets and go straight to Mutare there and start collecting blood from people saying you want to test for malaria. You have to develop your protocol. You submit it to your supervisors, your mentors, you submit it to your institutional ethics committee. So all universities in Zimbabwe actually have functioning ethics committees or that are being trained so that they can look at proposals. And then you need to get the necessary ethics clearance before you do any research. That is important. So here, I'm just showing you. So the organization that's at the top is the Research Council of Zimbabwe, which is responsible for setting up councils in all ministries. So we do have a research council in agriculture, looking at proposals in agriculture, a research council in mining, and we do have a research council in health, where you guys report to or will be working with, because we are all in health. So that's the Medical Research Council of Zimbabwe, MRCZ. It's close to St. Anne's Hospital there. That's where their new offices are. So what this council, that's the National Ethics Body or National Ethics Office, that gives approvals for researchers, for students to carry out research which involves human beings. It's either you'll be collecting swabs from the nose, collecting blood, or even going out to ask questionnaires. You can be asking people about their experiences with vaccine, with the COVID vaccine. Simple questionnaires. But since you are going to be dealing with human beings, you need that clearance. Because otherwise you might ask them harmful questions and they go and kill themselves. So the ethics committee has to look at your protocol before you go out in the field to get it out. Then under MRCZ, we have the institutional ethics committees. They have different names. They can be institutional ethics committee, institutional review board, research ethics committee, institutional ethics review board. An example there is JREC, which is when we say institutional, it's based at the Faculty of Medicine. There's also one that is at the main campus, UZ. I'll show you other universities that also have institutional, and we also have research institutes in the country like BRTI, which also have an ethics committee. Then MRCZ is the national, is the one that monitors what all these institutional committees are doing and training them, training the researchers and the committee members on how to review proposals. Then we have under that researchers. So I fall under researchers because I'm a research scientist. And then your students, academic students are going to be carrying out research, which might involve human participants using human blood, using human samples. And then we have our research participants, people from whom we collect data, it could be age, gender, blood samples, etc. Then we also have different ministries. We have the Office of the President and Cabinet, to which the Research Council of Zimbabwe reports to. Then we have the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development. That's our parent ministry. As universities, we report to that. But as MRCZ, there's also the Ministry of Health and Child Care. So the Research Council set up the MRCZ under the Ministry of Health to look into health-related research issues. Then we all, the MRCZ also works hand in hand with the MCAZ, the Medicines Authority. So here, and there are the different statutory instruments or acts. This is the Research Act of Zimbabwe, Research Act of Zimbabwe, statutory instrument. These are the guiding documents that these different organizations use when they are carrying out their work. The other work that the especially MRCZ does is to stop any research where people are reported to be dying. They can go there, carry out an inspection, and either give advice or they can stop the research. So this is how research in Zimbabwe is regulated, is monitored, or who gives oversight. Then we have the National Biotechnology Authority. Some of you might know it. And NBA, that's a potential employer for some of you guys who are doing the BMS course after you graduate, after your master's, for some of your potential employers. They do give permission, permits, or approval for studies that involve use of biomedically engineered products like vaccines. You want to do a vaccine study, you need to get. So for a study, you might, if you involve foreign researchers, they have to be registered. You know, you need to check. Otherwise, we'll be allowing people coming from other countries who actually have criminal records, so they have to be screened and checked and registered by the Research Council. So if it is a clinical trial that might need clearance from MCAZ, clearance from MRCZ, clearance and registration, foreigners with the Research Council, NBA, even a letter from the ministry. So, but at the center of medical research ethics clearance is the Medical Research Council of Zimbabwe. They will guide you, whether you are a full professor, a full researcher, a lecturer, student, they will guide you on where you should go to get your respective approvals to carry out your research. So that's the Zimbabwe Research Ethics for you to just get an idea. Examples, I said we have institutional review boards. We have JREC, a country network, and we have the Biomedical Research and Training Institute, BRTI, the institute that does biomedical research. Tertiary hospitals, Harare Hospital, Mpilo, they have an ethics committee. OREC, that is Africa University, Bindura University, their ethics committee is in the process of being trained by MRCC so that they can. Then we have DOW, also WUA, their ethics committees are under training with the National Ethics Committee, MRCC, so that they can, the committee members at these institutions who are mostly lecturers and some lay people can be incorporated, can review proposals from students, from lecturers, staff, before they are implemented, give appropriate ethics. I'm talking about ethics review. Just want to emphasize it is not a barrier to research. These committees that I've talked about here and these bodies that I talked about here, they are not there to impede research or to be such a stumbling block for people who want to carry. They are actually there to promote research, to give proper guidance, because this actually have to give guidance to researchers, local, national guidance and guidelines, and even international. For Zimbabwe, we are not an isolated island. We work with other countries. Whatever research goes on in Zimbabwe also has an effect to other countries. So we are there, or we respect international guidance. So ethics reviews is not a barrier. Some of you might have heard, I think there's JREC, and they're like, oops. So I'm a member of JREC. So one of our tasks is to educate researchers and staff that that committee is not there holding spears and axes and wars to chop your proposal. That's a poor researcher who is trying to submit their proposal. This is not what happened. They are not there to be a barrier to research, but they are actually there to make sure this can be a researcher or a student, one of you, bringing their proposal. We want to have it approved in an ethical manner. This might have happened in the past when ethics committees were not properly trained, but now their role and the members who are there is to promote research, to make sure when a researcher, even if the proposal is shoddy, they can actually guide the researcher, give them comments. It will take long, but if the researcher continues to be interested, they can, in the end, bring a proposal that can be. So this is not what ethics review is about. We want to act as a stumbling block, actually to promote, right? I'll just give you a historical perspective. Why do we talk about research ethics? It is because in the past, some atrocities happened. You know, people participated. There were no committees to look at proposals. People just woke up from their beds, from their homes, and just started, you know, doctors would just carry out research on people who came to their rooms for treatment, and participants were not fully informed of what was going on, and some people even ended up dying. So we do have historical cases that we talk about. What used to happen in the past is now helping us to learn how to do research properly. So we do have several cases that happened in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Even now, there's still an ethical research going on, but there are all these research ethics awareness seminars. What we are doing here with you as part 2 students learning about research ethics is to catch you young so that you are aware from a young age. If you want to take the career as a scientist, as a doctor who does research, you know there is. So the university actually trains, get a certificate, but here we're just giving you a 1-hour introductory lecture on research. But the Medical Research Council, the Research Support Center, which is that building, maybe you might not even understand what goes on in that building. They do offer research ethics courses, students or staff, and they go through these historical cases. There were experiments that were carried out by the Nazis. I said I love internet, I love Google. You can go and read more of these cases. I won't be able to fully expound on them. So the Nazi doctors carried out experiments on prisoners who were taken into the concentration camps. This is in the 1930s during World War II, 1939 to 1945. Some people even ended up dying. I'll give an example. Malaria was a huge problem in Europe. It is now under control. So there was a doctor called Dr. Mengele. He was asked by the German generals or leaders of the soldiers to look for effective medication for malaria. So they would test poisons, on the prisoners. And the prisoners were just injected. They didn't know what was. They did a lot. Dr. Mengele, so please write down. I would want you to search more on Dr. Mengele and the Nazi experiment. Then we have the Tuskegee study, which happened in America, a state called Alabama, where people were we had syphilis, we denied treatment for syphilis, even though when penicillin became available and effective. So there was the nurse who actually would inject people with the infected men with saline to deny them. What did this? It was a group of doctors. They just wanted to see at what stage a person dies syphilis, what happens. Then there were human radiation experiments carried out by the US Army. Lots of people died, harmed, and we have guidelines that have come, international guidelines that have come because of these atrocities. We have the Nuremberg Code, which came out because of the Nazi experiment. Mengele and these other 21 accomplices, technicians who were carrying out those unethical experiments in the concentration camps were sentenced to life in prison. And we have the Nuremberg Code, which was the first ethics guideline on how research should be done. It states that people should be told adequate information about the study, and they should voluntarily agree to participate. If they want to withdraw. So people that participated in the Nazi experiments were not allowed to withdraw. They would only continue or die. So that was the syphilis study, 1932 to 1972. That was a whooping 40 years of study. And then these same doctors went on, those were the Nazi doctors during the Second World War. And then there were the Guatemala, I'll talk about the Guatemala experiments, where those doctors who carried out research on the syphilis patients in America went on to Guatemala, and they actually intentionally infected prisoners, prostitutes, children with syphilis and denied them treatment. They just wanted to see how much the disease progresses. So we talk about these unethical studies so that we teach you, we sensitize you that it is not right to carry out ethical research. And these people got away, those in the Nazi, because they were not there were no ethics committees to look at their proposals, but now we are saying at every university, there's an ethics committee. If there's no ethics committee, you submit to MNRCZ. At least at the national level, we are all covered. You take your protocol to MNRCZ. The reviewers are given your protocol to get it over 2 weeks, a month, depending on complexity of the study. They give their comments. And these reviewers are actually trained on what to check in the protocols, so that when the protocol is finally implemented, either at a hospital, in the schools, there will be no harm that will be done. So the key word, the take-home message from research ethics is we want to protect first the participants on whom we carry out research, but we also want to protect you as students who will be carrying out research. You'll be the PIs, the principal investigators. We want to protect you. When we protect you, we also protect the university, because when a student or a staff member carries out an ethical research, it will be out there on, the power of social media. It will be on the internet in an instant that Prof. Butire and his students carried out an ethical research in Zimbabwe, and it will be all over. It will put the university, it will put the staff, it will put the students in disrepute, and the university will not be seen in the light. Right. We also have Zimbabwean examples where an ethical research has been done. Parasites of Mavida, McGowan, and Marondera, Tena, Marondera, mosquito feeding at one of our national institutes, and late treatment of schistosomiasis affected women, and taking of pictures in patients. So when you want to do anything in patients, you need to ask them for consent. It has to be written down that they have agreed. So let me just take you through. Dr. McGowan was an anesthetist doctor working at Paralenyatwa and Avenues Clinic. These two big hospitals close to us. He just increased. He had this research in his own head, which we don't want. When you want to do research, you want to research anything, you write a proposal or a protocol, submit it for ethics clearance, and you get approval. So he just started increasing the dose. There's a booklet, I'm sure some of you have seen it, called EDLIS, where anything to do with treatment, drugs, anesthetic doses are regulated in their guidelines on how to do it. So Dr. McGowan just increased the dose of anesthetist. So he's the person who put people to sleep or anesthetize them before an operation. It could be women giving birth or men going through an operation. He just increased, and those people took a long time to wake up because of what he was doing. Actually, 3 men, 4 women, and children. Their number actually come to 10 in total who died because of what Dr. McGowan. So we should not just carry out research when we see a patient and say, I just want to test this. Then Dr. Tena Marondera, was in the 1980s, before we had any drugs for HIV available. And he tested povidone iodine, betadine. It's applied externally or topically on the skin for wounds, but he said if it can kill bacteria on the table surfaces and then he made his patients to drink povidone, and 20 patients actually died. He said there are no drugs for HIV, so I can as well test this. Dr. McGowan was deported to the UK, his home country, and he continued to do that until they deregistered him from their register of doctors. Then we have mosquito feeding. NIHR, that's the National Institute of Health Research. It's out there in Tongogara Street. I worked there. So when I got there in 1994 as a junior scientist, there were men, sweepers, junior staff members who always used to wear long-sleeved shirts. It was because they were used as mosquito feeders or mosquito bait. Mosquitoes need, they can use any other blood, but they love biting on human beings because we have nice smooth skin, which their proboscis can easily pierce and they get blood. So the National Institute, this was research, mind you, that they were carrying out. They were keeping colonies of mosquito for research in developing and testing effective anti-mosquito sprays, repellents, and so forth. So they needed a colony, but these colonies needed to be breeding and continuing to produce more mosquitoes. So people would stick in their hands, these laborers, as part of their any other job on their CV was to feed these mosquitoes. So it was unethical until one principal research officer went to Denmark and learned that you can actually buy blood from the blood transfusion services and hang them. You know, the blood will be in very thin membranes, as thin as our skin, and then the mosquitoes will just be feeding from 24 hours, feeding them. Some having somebody come in and stick their hand in. So these men used to have hands bitten, and what did they get in return as benefit? They would just get a week off from working every month. So there are some of those. So why we do research ethics is when you guys get employed somewhere, you can always check on the practices that are currently going on in your institution or where you're coming from, or where you go as part-time, and you can always advise and guide and say, no, this is not ethical. We'll find another way. Just like what that principal research officer. So when he came back, he went straight to the director, said, we have to stop this mosquito feeding using human beings. They are technologies. So that's why we are having this course. We want you guys to develop innovative projects, innovative proposals, innovative goods that can be used where we are doing things, maybe using old methods or something that they can be replaced. Then importance of obtaining ethics clearance. Why? Why are we talking about ethics? We need to do approved research has to be approved first. And you don't do your research first, then go and seek approval. The process is your protocol, submit your supervisor, submit for ethics, then you get your approval later. When I send you the slides, I'm going to scan my own JREC and MNCZ approval letters that I got for my own studies so that you can have an idea of what that letter looks like. Protection of research participants is why we do ethics clearing. The ethics committees will check that you're not going to be harming. It's a professional requirement for researchers. And then I know most of you might not have yet done a publication, but there are things that we call publications or reports from science or from scientific projects that we call manuscripts or publications. They actually ask you, so you do it online, you do your research, you have your results, you analyze them, you write a report, you write your manuscript, then you want to submit it to a journal, you do that online. They will ask you to upload your ethics clearance letter. That's why we're saying you need to have the project cleared. Because if you don't have an ethics clearance letter, they will not publish you. So you will not be known internationally as you've done that way. So the correct procedure is what we want to tell you. Your ethics tests. And the ethics is given for a duration of 1 year. You need to continually renew it until you have. Then we have research ethics guidelines. I talked about atrocities that have happened in the past. And those ones have led to us having guidelines. I'll give an example. In Zimbabwe, in the past, when we were very young, we used to know when the father of the house dies, when the man is buried and we have the wife, and they had many kids then, isn't it? 6, 7, 8 kids. They'll be chased away from that house by the Babamninis, and The relatives would move in, this poor woman, and they'll be chased away to go back to her own home, and the house, property, the cars, businesses will be taken over until the government put an act, which is called the Widows Protection Act. So now you can actually be arrested and go to jail if you dare confiscate or steal from somebody's estate or somebody's properties. So the same thing has happened with ethics, where in the past we never used to have, when the Nazi, the syphilis, the regulation was loose or not even there. But now we have those guidelines because of the atrocities that have happened. It's because of abuse of research participants in the past led to development or codes for medical. These are the guidelines that students you need to know. You can download these online, read stuff in the universities as researchers anyway. So we have the Declaration of Helsinki, which came out because of the atrocities that were done by Mengele, developed by doctors, medical doctors. Beaumont report came out after the syphilis study. Then the Nuremberg Code came out after the World War II. Atrocities committed by Mengele. Then we have those are international guidelines, right? Then we have our local guideline, Medicine Control Authority of Zimbabwe. We have the Research Act of Zimbabwe, which is dated. Also have the SIOMS guidelines. So here, just to give you a flavor of the international guidelines that is Zimbabwean researchers, students, scientists have to be aware of. And they all speak the same language with them. It's about the protection of the participants and also protecting the researchers so that you don't commit atrocities. Ethics, if I ask you, give me 6 research ethics guidelines, you have those. Moral principles of ethical research, I'm going to talk about the principles of ethics. These were written in the Beaumont Report, 1979. We have the principle of justice, principle of non-maleficence, simply meaning do no harm to your participants. You don't want to leave your participants in a worse off position than when you met them. You actually want to leave them in a better place. Principle of beneficence, research should make a positive contribution to the welfare of people. If it is research in COVID vaccines, the people who participate should actually benefit from that vaccine and be protected. Principle of autonomy, research must respect the rights. You don't force people to participate, or you don't tell them, I'm coming from the Faculty of Medicine, I have permission from my dean, I have permission from the Minister of Health to take. No, people have to agree. If they don't want to force them, that's respect the principle of autonomy. Then I need to talk about vulnerable groups. What do we mean when we say people are vulnerable? These are people who either have vulnerability around them. This can be pregnant women, fetus. You can't go around testing any medicines on pregnant women. There are some studies where being pregnant is actually an exclusion criteria. Like when the COVID vaccines were developed, pregnant women were not enrolled in the initial clinical trials, but later on when the vaccine was found to be safe and for use in anyone, they also got it. In children below the age of majority, they might not be able to understand scientific issues. Persons with mental and physical disabilities, elderly participants. What do you do when you want to do research in children, persons with mental and elderly? You get a witness, you get somebody related to those people who consent on their behalf. We do have research going on in Zimbabwe testing pediatric HIV doses for the HIV drugs in children. But the parents have to give what we call parental consent. Then prisoners, You go through the authorities in the prisoners. You don't just go into a prison like what the Guatemala, the doctors from US who went to Guatemala, they just went into the prison and started injecting people with syphilis. So the prisoners are protected by the international human rights organizations to go through that. And for you to carry out research, it should be relevant to them. If you want just to see cholera in Zimbabwe, you don't go to the prison straight away. But if your research is about determining the prevalence of cholera, malaria, TB in prisoners, then you go through the ethics clearance and captive populations, that is hospitalized people, and sexual minorities. You also go through the ethics committee clearing. So in the past, there used to be some kind of abuse reported amongst people who were doing long training in, long periods of training in the medical school, because they'll be familiar to the professors, and they can say no to the professor when they want to do research. So those people also need to be protected, and they need to be aware that they are not abused. Okay, so ethics committee, decision matrix. The ethics committee will check if the protocol is, okay, there's a question here. Let me go back, sexual minorities. Thank you for that question. Let me go back immediately. Sexual minorities are groups of people. I'll give an example. LGBTI, those people who either have sexual relationships, women having sexual relationships with other women, men, the MSM, we call the men having sexual relationships with, or yes. So those people who have, I don't want to call it weird, but outside the norm kind of sexual relationships. I'll give you an example. At MRCZ, we got a protocol that wanted to determine the number of people in Zimbabwe who have same-sex relationships. So that was a study classified as involving sexual minorities. So it had to go through the ethics committee for clearance, also the ministry for clearance, so that we could. These people usually hide their sexual orientation, and you need to do what we call a snowball technique, where if you get a few who own up that they are, and then they can always refer you to the others. Thank you for the question. So this is what the committee will look at: benefit of the study, justice, inclusion, and exclusion. We don't carry out all research in the urban areas and exclude completely the rural areas. So research has to be balanced. Some research is done in urban areas, some research is done in rural areas, because we want everybody to have a chance of participating in research. Risks are some of the things that the ethics committee, I've talked about this: physical risks, psychological risks, social risks. And does the design minimize the risk? And if not, how can it? So these are all the things that the ethics committee members look at. I'll give you a simple example of psychological harm. There's a protocol that came for review, and they wanted to interview people who had done an HIV screening. This was when HIV was still, we didn't have drugs rolled out to everyone, so there was a lot of stigma. And the protocol was approved. People thought it was harmless, but we started getting reports that people were committing suicide after taking part in the interview. Then a team of inspectors, monitors were sent out to see what was happening out there in Mutare, only to realize the people who were conducting the study or who were asking the questions or administering the questionnaires, asking people about their experience of HIV testing, were actually untrained people. They had not received adequate training on how to carry out it. So they would ask sensitive questions and the people would just not take it, go and hang themselves. So training is mandatory for research teams before they can go out and do their famous and ethical research studies. I'm just talking about examples. So there I have a list. Nazi, I talked about that. Guatemala, Tuskegee, that was syphilis, Havasupai. So we could spend a day talking about these. Havasupai stored samples. I'll talk about that because my field, I used a lot of stored samples. So this was a researcher or a professor at a university in the USA. They collected samples from the local Indian population for diabetes testing. But they went on, they took the samples, put them in the freeze. Then over 10, 15 years, they started carrying out genetic research on the samples, research that the community didn't approve of. Then one of the grandchildren of those the Indian people came and was attending a conference, and she was hearing all these results about the Havasupai famous and all that research, and she simply asked, "Did you get permission from my community to carry out all?" And this just started a whole huge case of litigation, court cases, between the university and the community when they realized their samples were used for other research that they had not agreed to. So what am I saying here? For all stored samples, we ask the participants to give us permission for any future work. So they need to know their samples will be used either for once off and destroyed or for future work. So as researchers, as scientists, we need to be. So in your innovative proposal, if you're going to be proposed to use stored samples, you need ethics clearly. Then we have aldehyde, Trovan. We talked about McGowan, about Tena. Parasites of Mavida. This was a guy who used to work at the National Institute of Health Research, was denied praziquantel for a year. The researchers just wanted to see the harm that happens to the liver, to the kidneys, to the bladder, when they did the sonography. He died soon after retirement. Experiments were done when he was in his early 20s. So people are not sure. Did he die because of that period when we had parasites, huge parasite load in his system and being denied treatment until they were done the study? So all those things, we don't want such studies. We don't want people who propose to test people, and when there's an effective drug, you have to give the people. We do not allow disease progression studies where you deny people. So those are some of the things that ethics committees check. Nazi, you can go through this slide and even go on internet and learn more about this. The Tuskegee, for your information, Guatemala. Then I had the opportunity in 2012 when I attended. What I'm also trying to do here is we really need people that are interested in research ethics. So I'm a facilitator for MRCZ, for JREG, for the Research Support Center in training research ethics. And we want to have a big pool of research, of people who are interested in research ethics. So there are these international conferences that are done, like this PRIMA one in Baltimore in the USA. This was in 2012, where I met Susan Riverby. This is a historian who actually discovered the this unethical Guatemala syphilis. So these doctors carried out the study in the 1940s, and they stored their papers there within the archives of a library in the US. And Susan Diveby was a historian. She was looking for something else. Then she stumbled upon this, and here she had just finished giving her talk. That's me sitting with her after she had given a presentation on how she discovered the Guatemala unethical study. So I was trying to just find out from her, you know, what she does. Is somebody interested in ethics? Right. I've tried to cover with you. Are you still there? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, let me look on the chat box and see if we have any critical questions that I need to write. Not many people logged in again today, but I'm sure we can share the recording so that people can. All right, any questions to my presentation on research ethics? Just to recap on what I managed to cover with you today. So let me say on research ethics, you can actually do a whole day of research ethics. You can do 2 days, 3 days. And actually in South Africa, they actually have a master's, and people can do PhDs in research ethics, where they go into all these issues in more detail. But for purposes of our this module, you just need to be aware there's this thing called research ethics, and their ethics guidelines, and the Zimbabwe research regulatory framework, key players in research, and then an idea about famous and ethical. So as a student or as a lecturer, if you carry out an ethical research, you go before a disciplinary committee, you can actually be stripped of your professorship, and you can lose your job. So it is important to carry out ethical approved research. So I covered those aspects with you. Let me see, looks like there's somebody with a raised hand. Please speak up. Go ahead, ask your question. All right, there's a reminder to share the slides. Okay, I'll share with you. Even the slides from yesterday, I'll share it on your WhatsApp platform. Slides from yesterday, right? Okay. Any question related to research? Anyone here who wants to learn more about research ethics? I'm recruiting people into this interesting discipline called research ethics, where we learn about how to carry out research properly when we say in an ethical manner. Right? Questions? All right. If there are no more questions, I can see it's now after 1. I can safely say goodbye. So see you on Tuesday. If you check your timetables, I'm going to be sharing the schedule again. Prof. Gomo will be taking you for your professional writing, scholarly writing on Tuesday. I've done his slot today. He was not available. So take note. Our lectures continue with the same Zoom link next week from Tuesday. Hopefully we'll finish on Thursday. And when we meet, I'll be explaining to you what your assignment, what your examination will be like, because that will be our last week. Okay, goodbye. I will share the slides. Thank you.